Long ago, in a vast kingdom hidden between towering mountains and endless deserts, there lived a man named Chinaza. Unlike any other, Chinaza had a remarkable gift. He never spoke a word of falsehood. His truth was not just honesty, but an unwavering reflection of reality itself. Some said he had been blessed by the spirits of the ancients, while others feared that knowing too much truth would bring misfortune.
One day, word of Chinaza's truth-telling reached the ears of King Obiora, a ruler both feared and admired for his cunning. The king, suspicious of all, summoned Chinaza to his grand palace, determined to test the limits of his honesty. No man can resist a lie forever, the king mused, and if he speaks only truth, then perhaps he sees more than others do. The next morning, Chinaza arrived at the palace gates. The guards, skeptical of his reputation, led him through the long corridors of the king's court, where nobles and advisors whispered in hushed tones. When he finally stood before King Obiora, the ruler studied him closely, eyes narrowing with curiosity. Chinaza, the king began, his voice laced with amusement. Is it true that you have never spoken a single lie? It is true, Your Majesty, Chinaza replied calmly. The king leaned forward. And you will never lie, no matter the cost. I shall never lie, for truth is my only path. A sly smile crept onto the king's face. Then I have a task for you. You will go to my summer palace and tell the queen that I shall dine with her tomorrow at sunset. Tell her to prepare a great feast in my honor. Chinaza bowed and left for the queen's quarters, unaware that the king had no intention of attending the feast. He turned to his court and chuckled. Tomorrow we shall see if even the most honest man can be tricked into lying. When Chinaza arrived at the summer palace, he was greeted by the queen's attendants. He relayed the king's message, but before departing he added, However, my queen, perhaps you should prepare a feast, and perhaps you should not. Perhaps the king will arrive at sunset, and perhaps he will not. The queen frowned. What do you mean? Did my husband not send you with a clear message? Chinaza nodded. He did, but when I left him, he had not yet mounted his horse. I do not know whether he rode towards the summer palace or turned back towards his throne. The queen, intrigued by Chinaza's careful words, ordered her servants to prepare a modest feast, just in case. The next day, King Obiora stayed in his main palace, expecting to hear that Chinaza had lied. But when he arrived at the summer palace the following evening, the queen welcomed him with a small but prepared meal. She smiled knowingly. The wise Chinaza did not lie, she said. He told me only what he knew to be true. The king's amusement turned to admiration. So, it is true. This man cannot be deceived into falsehood. But the king was not done testing Chinaza yet. He leaned back, a new plan forming in his mind. If Chinaza could not be made to lie, then he would see if the truth itself could be used against him. The next morning, King Obiora sent for Chinaza once again. This time, the court was filled with onlookers, curious to see what challenge the king would devise. Chinaza, the king said, his voice carrying authority. I will send you to the governor of the eastern province. Deliver my decree, word for word, as you always do." Chinaza bowed. "As you command, your majesty." The king handed him a sealed scroll. However, unknown to Chinaza, the king had devised a trap. Within the scroll, the decree stated that Chinaza was to be imprisoned upon arrival, accused of conspiracy against the throne. The king wanted to test if Chinaza's devotion to truth would be his undoing. Chinaza set out on his journey with a small escort. The road to the eastern province was long and treacherous, winding through thick forests and desolate plains. Along the way, a weary traveler joined them, a man dressed in humble robes who introduced himself as Nkem, a wandering scholar. Nkem observed Chinaza with great curiosity. "I have heard of you, the man who never lies," he said. "Is it true that you would rather perish than speak falsehood?" Chinaza nodded. "The truth is my only path." Nkem smiled knowingly. "Truth is a sharp blade, my friend. Wielded carelessly, it may cut the hand that holds it." As they traveled, Nkem noticed the sealed scroll. "May I ask what message you carry?" he inquired. "I do not know its contents," Chinaza admitted. "My duty is to deliver it as it is." Nkem's eyes darkened. A wise man knows when to read the words meant for his own doom. That night, as they camped by a river, Nkem spoke again. "Chinaza, if you are truly devoted to truth, then would you refuse to see the very words that may change your fate?" Chinaza hesitated. He had never questioned an order, but something in Nkem's voice unsettled him. Slowly, he unsealed the scroll and read the decree. His heart pounded as he saw the words written by the king's own hand. He was to be imprisoned and accused of treason upon arrival. Nkem watched his reaction carefully. "Now tell me, truth-bearer, will you still deliver this message?" Chinaza's heart pounded as he stared at the decree, the ink on the parchment dark and unforgiving. His mind raced. This was the ultimate test of his truth. To deliver the message as written meant certain doom, but to withhold it meant betraying his word. Nkem watched him carefully, his expression unreadable. "Truth alone will not save you," Nkem said quietly, "but wisdom might." Chinaza clenched his fists. "I cannot lie, but I can speak what I know." He took a deep breath, carefully rolling the scroll back up. "I will deliver the message, but not without revealing what I have seen with my own eyes." Nkem nodded approvingly. "Then you may yet outwit the king's snare." When Chinaza arrived at the gates of the governor's palace, his escort dismounted, their hands resting on their sword hilts. The guards recognized the royal seal and hurried to announce his arrival. Within minutes, the grand doors opened, revealing Governor Adana, a woman known for her shrewd intellect and unwavering loyalty to the crown. Chinaza bowed and presented the sealed decree. "Your Excellency, I bring a message from King Obiora." Governor Adana accepted the scroll, but paused, studying Chinaza. "You are the man who never lies, are you not?" "I am." She raised an eyebrow. Then tell me, do you know the contents of this scroll? Chinaza met her gaze. I do. Then speak what you know. Chinaza inhaled deeply. This decree orders my imprisonment under charges of treason, but I am no traitor. Murmurs erupted among the gathered officials. Governor Adana's sharp eyes flicked from the scroll to Chinaza. And yet, you still delivered it? I do not lie, Chinaza said firmly. But I also do not deliver messages without understanding their weight. The king seeks to test me, but his test has now reached your hands. What will you do with the truth? Governor Adana's grip on the parchment tightened. She turned to her advisors. Bring me my scribes. We shall respond in kind. That evening, under the glow of lanterns, Governor Adana wrote a letter to King Obiora. In it, she detailed Chinaza's unwavering honesty and the contents of the decree he carried. She closed with a simple, damning question. Is this the justice of a wise king? She turned to Chinaza. You will carry this message back to the king. Chinaza nodded. And I will deliver it, word for word. A storm was brewing, and the king would not take kindly to being challenged. Chinaza set off on his return journey to the capital, carrying Governor Adana's letter. The air around him was heavy with anticipation, for he knew the king would not take kindly to the governor's defiance. Ekwueme, still traveling with him, watched in silence, as if weighing the risks of what was to come. As they crossed a dense forest, the wind howled through the trees, sending a shiver through the escorting soldiers. Then suddenly, an arrow struck the ground near Chinaza's feet. A band of masked riders emerged from the shadows. Hand over the letter, one of them barked, sword raised. Chinaza stepped forward. I cannot. My duty is to deliver it. One of the soldiers in Chinaza's escort drew his sword. Stand down, messenger, or your truth will be your end. Ekwueme placed a hand on Chinaza's shoulder. Truth is your gift, but wisdom is your shield. Choose wisely. Chinaza surveyed the ambushers, their stance tense, their weapons sharp. He realized these were not mere bandits. They bore the markings of the royal guard. The king had sent them. You fear words so much that you send swords to silence them? Chinaza asked calmly. The leader of the attackers narrowed his eyes. King Obiora does not tolerate disobedience. That letter does not reach the palace. Chinaza exhaled deeply. He could not fight, but he could still wield truth. He turned to the soldiers in his own escort. You have been ordered to protect me. Will you now betray your duty? The guards hesitated, glancing at each other. The ambushers pressed forward, their swords glinting in the moonlight. Then I will not resist, Chinaza declared, holding the letter up. If you wish to destroy it, do so before my eyes. The leader of the ambushers hesitated, staring at Chinaza. A lie could be defeated, but the truth, standing unshaken, caused unease. One of Chinaza's own escorts suddenly stepped forward. We swore to protect the king's messenger, not destroy his word. He turned his sword toward the ambushers. You have no right to intervene." A tense silence followed. Then the leader of the attackers lowered his weapon. "Tell the king the message was delivered. But know this, truth can be a blade just as much as a shield." With that, the attackers vanished into the night. When Chinaza finally reached the capital, he was escorted straight to the throne room. King Obiora sat upon his gilded seat, his expression unreadable. The courtiers whispered among themselves, awaiting the verdict. Chinaza stepped forward and handed the letter to the king. "Your Majesty, I have delivered the governor's response, as you commanded." The king opened the letter and read it slowly. His fingers curled into a fist as he reached the final line. His eyes flickered with something between anger and admiration. "You could have hidden the truth," the king said at last. "You could have destroyed this letter and claimed ignorance." "I could not," Chinaza replied, "for I do not lie." The king exhaled sharply. "Then tell me, what should I do with you?" Chinaza met his gaze. "That is for you to decide, Your Majesty. But a ruler who does not embrace truth will always live in fear of it." The court fell silent. A challenge had been spoken, but not in defiance, in honesty. And now the king had to decide whether to accept it. The court remained silent, waiting for King Obiora's decision. His fingers drummed against the armrest of his throne, his gaze fixed on Chinaza. "You have delivered the truth, even when it endangered your life," the king finally spoke. "Yet you challenge me in my own court. Do you expect me to reward such defiance?" Chinaza remained steady. "I expect nothing, Your Majesty. I only fulfill my duty." The king studied him for a long moment before rising to his feet. "For your loyalty to truth, I will not have you imprisoned." A murmur of relief rippled through the courtiers, but then the king's voice hardened. "However, I cannot allow such defiance to go untested. If truth is your path, then I will give you another mission, one even you may not return from." Chinaza bowed. "I accept." King Obiora smirked. "Then listen carefully. You will travel to the distant land of Zubaru, where my rival, King Damanu, rules. You will deliver my words to him and return with his response. But be warned, King Damanu is known for his cunning. If you speak only truth, he may find a way to use it against you." A hushed whisper spread across the court. Everyone knew that no messenger had ever returned from Zubaru. The journey to Zubaru was treacherous. Chinaza and a small group of escorts rode through scorching deserts and jagged mountains. Along the way, they stopped at a small village to rest. There, an elderly woman approached Chinaza. "You are the one who speaks only truth," she said, her voice raspy with age. "I have a warning for you." Chinaza listened intently as she continued. "King Damanu does not need swords to defeat his enemies. He asks them a single question, and their own words destroy them." And Kem, who had accompanied Chinaza once again, frowned. "And what is this question?" The old woman shook her head. "It is never the same. But if you answer it without care, it will seal your fate." Chinaza thanked the woman, but her warning lingered in his mind. If King Daminu's weapon was deception, then Chinaza would have to wield truth more carefully than ever before. Upon reaching King Daminu's court, Chinaza was brought before the ruler of Zubaru. The king was a tall man with piercing eyes and a smile that did not reach them. "You must be the famed truth speaker," King Daminu said. "Tell me, does your king send you with peace or with war?" Chinaza bowed. "King Obiora sends his words, and I bring them as they are." King Daminu chuckled. "Clever, but before I accept your message, I will ask you a question. If you answer truthfully, you may leave unharmed. If you lie, even once, my guards will know." Chinaza nodded. "Ask your question." The king leaned forward. "If I were to declare war on your king, what would you say?" A hush fell over the court. It was a trap. If Chinaza answered in a way that angered King Daminu, he would be imprisoned or executed. If he refused to answer, he would be seen as weak. And if he tried to avoid the question, the king would not be satisfied. Chinaza took a breath. "If you declare war, then war will come." King Daminu narrowed his eyes. "And what if I do not?" "Then peace remains." The king smirked. "And what if I do neither?" Chinaza's gaze did not waver. "Then only time will tell." A long silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, King Daminu laughed. "You are indeed a rare man, Chinaza. Most who stand before me either crumble in fear or drown in their own words. But your truth is like water, slipping past my grasp." He motioned for a scribe. "I will send my response to King Obiora. And you, truth speaker, have earned my respect. You may leave in peace." Chinaza bowed, knowing he had escaped yet another trial. But many more awaited him. With King Daminu's response in hand, Chinaza and his escorts departed from Zubaru. Though he had survived the encounter, he knew that his greatest challenge was yet to come, delivering the message to King Obiora without falling into another trap. As they traveled, Nkem rode beside Chinaza. "You handled King Daminu well, but Obiora will not be so easily impressed," he said. "He expected you to fail." Chinaza nodded. "Then I shall return and let the truth speak for itself." But the road was fraught with danger. As they camped one evening, a shadow moved in the trees. Before they could react, a group of mercenaries surrounded them, swords drawn. The leader of the mercenaries stepped forward, his eyes cold. "King Obiora does not need your message. Hand it over, and we will let you live." Chinaza remained calm. "If I do that, then my word would be meaningless." The mercenary smirked. "Then you leave us no choice." A battle erupted. Chinaza's escorts fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. Nkem, though unarmed, moved swiftly, knocking one assassin unconscious. Chinaza, refusing to wield a weapon, evaded attacks, his mind searching for a way out. Then, just as the mercenary leader raised his blade against Chinaza, an arrow flew through the night, striking him down. A group of warriors emerged from the shadows. The newcomers quickly overpowered the remaining mercenaries. Chinaza turned to see their leader, Princess Adan, King Obiora's estranged daughter. "You have made many enemies, truth speaker," she said, lowering her bow, "but perhaps also a few allies." Chinaza bowed. "I did not expect to see you here, Your Highness." "I have been watching you," she admitted. "My father fears what he cannot control. He would rather silence the truth than hear it." "Then why save me?" Chinaza asked. Adan's eyes darkened. "Because the truth is the only weapon left to defeat him." Under Adan's protection, Chinaza's group continued toward the capital. Along the way, she revealed her plans. She intended to challenge her father's rule, believing that his fear of the truth had made him a tyrant. "I do not seek the throne," she said, "but I will not let my father destroy those who only wish to speak honestly." Chinaza considered her words carefully. He had never sought power, only to remain true to his path. But now, truth alone might not be enough. By the time they reached the capital, rumors had spread Chinaza had returned, and with him the princess who had long been absent. The court was in an uproar, and King Obiora's patience was wearing thin. As Chinaza stepped into the throne room, the king glared at him. "You return with words that should never have left my kingdom. Speak, and let me see if you still dare to defy me." Chinaza took a breath. The truth would not be silenced. The throne room erupted into chaos. Some nobles gasped in horror at Chinaza's words, while others exchanged wary glances. King Obiora's most loyal advisors were silent, their faces betraying nothing. Princess Adan stepped forward. "Father, you have ruled with strength, but fear has made you blind. Truth is not your enemy." Obiora's eyes burned with unspoken fury. "And what do you suggest? That I admit weakness? That I let a mere messenger dictate the fate of my kingdom?" Chinaza did not waver. A wise king does not fear truth. He wields it as a weapon against those who deceive him. For the first time, the king hesitated. A deep voice cut through the tension. "Your Majesty, this man is a threat." It was General Okoye, the head of the king's army. He stepped forward, his expression calm, but his eyes filled with calculation. He has returned from the prison of whispers, speaking the words of traitors. You cannot trust him. Chinaza turned to face the general. "And yet, I know of a plot against the throne, one that you are at the center of." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Okoye's jaw clenched, but he remained still. King Obiora narrowed his gaze. "If you are lying, Chinaza, you will not leave this court alive." Chinaza took a deep breath. "I do not lie." Chinaza stepped forward, addressing the court. "In the prison of whispers, I met Omawumi, a woman once loyal to this kingdom. She was imprisoned not for treason, but for uncovering the truth." He turned his sharp gaze to General Okoye. "She spoke of a betrayal long in the making. The king's enemies have not come from outside our borders, but from within." The court held its breath. Okoye smirked. And you expect them to believe the words of a condemned woman? Chinaza nodded. Yes, because her words match what I have seen. Chinaza turned to King Obiora. Your Majesty, your army does not march in full strength. There are those within it who do not serve you, but serve only Okoye. The king's brow furrowed. Explain. Chinaza took a steady breath. The general has been moving troops without your knowledge. Small units, stationed beyond the city walls. He is preparing for something greater than war. A hushed silence fell over the court. Then the king spoke. Bring me my commanders. I will hear the truth from their own mouths. That night, the king's spies returned with reports. Everything Chinaza had said was true. Okoye had been amassing his own forces, quietly positioning men loyal only to him. The king's fury was absolute. Guards! Seize him! But Okoye was prepared. He drew his sword, and within moments, chaos erupted in the throne room. His hidden loyalists turned against the royal guard. Swords clashed as the court descended into battle. Chinaza barely avoided a blade aimed for his throat, ducking behind a pillar as the palace erupted into war. Princess Adan fought beside her father, her bow taking down those who turned against the throne. Queen Ifunanya stood firm, directing loyal soldiers into formation. Amidst the chaos, Chinaza knew this would be the moment that determined the fate of the kingdom. The battle raged through the corridors of the palace. Steel clashed against steel, and the once grand hallways were filled with the cries of soldiers and the wounded. King Obiora, flanked by his most loyal guards, fought his way through the chaos, his fury ignited by Okoye's betrayal. Chinaza dodged a wild swing from an enemy soldier and found himself back to back with Princess Adan. This will not end with swords alone, he told her. We must find a way to turn the tide without destroying the kingdom. Adan loosed an arrow, striking an enemy archer. Then we must get to the eastern tower, she said. If we light the beacon, our remaining forces outside the palace will know to storm in. Chinaza nodded. Then we move now. Chinaza, Adan, and a small band of loyalists fought their way through the palace, cutting down enemies as they went. The eastern tower loomed ahead, but Okoye's forces had anticipated their move. A squad of elite warriors blocked their path. The leader, a towering warrior with a scar across his face, sneered. You will not leave this place alive, truth speaker. Chinaza did not flinch. Then I shall leave behind only truth. The battle that followed was fierce. Adan's archery skills proved invaluable, but they were still outnumbered. Just as hope began to wane, a sudden horn blast echoed across the palace grounds. The loyalists are here, Chinaza said, relief washing over him. We must reach the tower now. The battle raged through the corridors of the palace. The once grand throne room was now a battlefield of steel and blood. King Obiora, standing amidst his loyal warriors, faced his greatest challenge yet. Chinaza and Adan reached the tower, fending off attackers as they ascended. Adan loosed an arrow at the last guard, blocking their way. With a grunt, he fell, and Chinaza rushed forward to light the beacon. From the palace gates, horns blared. The remaining loyal forces, seeing the signal, charged into battle. As the fighting reached its peak, Chinaza descended back into the fray. He saw King Obiora and Okoye locked in a deadly duel. Okoye was a fierce warrior, but the king fought with the strength of a ruler defending his throne. Chinaza stepped forward. Okoye, surrender. The truth has unmasked you. The general snarled. Truth is only as strong as the blade that wields it. With a final clash of steel, the battle reached its end. The battle raged through the corridors of the palace. The once grand throne room was now a battlefield of steel and blood. King Obiora, standing amidst his loyal warriors, faced his greatest challenge yet. Chinaza and Adan reached the tower, fending off attackers as they ascended. Adan loosed an arrow at the last guard, blocking their way. With a grunt, he fell, and Chinaza rushed forward to light the beacon. From the palace gates, horns blared. The remaining loyal forces, seeing the signal, charged into battle. As the fighting reached its peak, Chinaza descended back into the fray. He saw King Obiora and Okoye locked in a deadly duel. Okoye was a fierce warrior, but the king fought with the strength of a ruler defending his throne. Chinaza stepped forward. Okoye, surrender. The truth has unmasked you. The general snarled. Truth is only as strong as the blade that wields it. With a final clash of steel, the battle reached its end. King Obiora, bloodied but standing, delivered the final strike. Okoye fell to his knees, his expression one of disbelief. "You were blind for so long, my king," he coughed, "and now you see." The court fell silent as Okoye collapsed. His rebellion ended. With the battle over, the palace stood in ruins, but the kingdom remained. The rebels who surrendered were spared, while those who still fought were subdued. King Obiora looked to Chinaza. "Your truth has saved this kingdom, but you have also changed it forever." With Okoye gone, King Obiora turned inward, reflecting on the events that had shaken his rule. He summoned Chinaza to the throne room, now quiet and empty. "You never wavered," the king admitted. "Not even when I sought to destroy you." Chinaza inclined his head. "Truth does not seek favor, Your Majesty, only clarity." The kingdom began to rebuild. Princess Adan was granted a position of power, assisting in restructuring the royal court to ensure no hidden betrayals would threaten the land again. As the kingdom healed, whispers of change spread beyond the palace walls. The people, too, had seen the cost of deception and the power of truth. Chinaza knew his role in this story had come to an end. He had no desire for power or recognition. As he prepared to leave, Adan approached him. "You could stay," she said. "Help rebuild what has been broken." Chinaza smiled. "Truth does not belong to one place. It must travel." With nothing but his wisdom and his word, Chinaza departed from the palace gates, disappearing into the horizon. His journey was not over, for the world was vast, and there were many more truths to be spoken. As the years passed, his name became legend, a tale whispered among rulers and common folk alike. And thus, the man who spoke only truth walked into eternity, his legacy forever etched in history. Okoye was defeated, his rebellion crushed. The palace, though battered, still stood. King Obiora, humbled by the events, turned to Chinaza. "You have saved my kingdom, but you have also changed it forever." Chinaza bowed. Truth does not seek favor, only clarity. The kingdom, forever altered by the truth, began to rebuild. And as for Chinaza, his journey was not yet over. As Chinaza and Nkem journeyed further, a messenger rode to meet them. Clad in silver armor, the rider bowed low. "The High Council of Arunma requests your presence." Chinaza exchanged a glance with Nkem. Arunma was known as a land of scholars and lawgivers, where justice was held above all else. "Why do they seek me?" Chinaza asked. The messenger's face darkened. "Because there is a trial that only truth can resolve." Arunma was unlike any place Chinaza had seen. Towering pillars lined the streets, and scholars in flowing robes debated in public forums. Here, knowledge was power, but so was manipulation. As Chinaza entered the great hall of judgment, he found himself before the High Council. At the center of the chamber stood Elder Obianuju, a woman known for her wisdom. "Chinaza," she said, "we stand at an impasse. A crime has been committed, but both accuser and accused swear they speak the truth." She motioned to the two figures before her. One was a merchant, the other a nobleman. "Help us, truth speaker, unravel this deception." Chinaza listened carefully as both men pleaded their cases. The merchant claimed the nobleman had stolen from him. The nobleman argued that the merchant sought to defame him. "You both swear you speak truth," Chinaza mused. "Yet truth cannot contradict itself." The nobleman sneered. "Then perhaps you are not as wise as they say." Chinaza studied them both. "There is another truth," he said at last, "one neither of you have spoken." The room fell silent. Through careful questioning, Chinaza unraveled the mystery. Neither man had lied, but both had been deceived. The real thief was Chidozi, an unseen force orchestrating their conflict for his own gain. The High Council was astonished. "How did you see what we could not?" Elder Obianuju asked. "Truth is not just in words," Chinaza said. "It is in what is left unsaid." Chidozi was brought to justice, and Arunma praised Chinaza. The High Council offered him a permanent place among them, to serve as the voice of truth. But Chinaza refused. "The moment I stay in one place, my truth serves only one people. I must walk where the path calls me." Obianuju nodded. "Then go, Chinaza, and may truth protect you." As they continued their journey, a rider approached, dust rising behind him. He carried a letter, its seal broken. "To the truth speaker, from the oracle of Nuri." Chinaza took the letter and read its chilling words. "Turn back, or the truth will end you." Ekwueme frowned. It seems someone does not wish for truth to be known. Chinaza folded the letter carefully. Then we must go forward. The scent of smoke filled the air long before Chinaza and Ekwueme reached the western lands. The once thriving villages were now smoldering ruins, their people displaced or enslaved by Zubairu's forces. Ekwueme clenched his fists. This is not conquest. This is destruction. Chinaza studied the scene before him. And where destruction rules, truth is buried. They followed the fleeing survivors to a hidden settlement deep in the hills. There, they met Elder Tafari, the last leader of the free people of the West. Zubairu cannot be reasoned with, Tafari warned. He listens only to power. Chinaza remained calm. Then I will speak truth, even to power. Chinaza and Ekwueme rode straight into Zubairu's stronghold, a fortress carved into the cliffs, guarded by warriors who had never known defeat. The moment they arrived, they were surrounded. A gruff soldier sneered at them. You come unarmed, foolish. Chinaza did not flinch. A lie needs a sword. The truth stands alone. The warrior hesitated. Then, with a curt nod, he led them into the throne room of Zubairu the Iron Fist. Zubairu was a towering man, his skin lined with scars from battles past. He sat upon a throne of iron, his dark eyes fixed upon Chinaza. You are the man who speaks only truth, he said, voice deep as thunder. Tell me then, who is the stronger man? The one who conquers or the one who kneels? Chinaza did not hesitate. Neither. The strongest man is the one who does not need to prove his strength. The warlord's expression did not change. Then suddenly, he laughed, a booming sound that echoed through the hall. Finally, Zubairu smirked. Then let us see if your truth can survive fire. He ordered Chinaza and Ekwueme thrown into the pit of flames, a deep chasm where only those who could endure the heat were deemed worthy. Ekwueme gritted his teeth. I hope your words are as strong as your will. Chinaza simply nodded. Truth does not burn. The heat was unbearable, the walls of the pit glowing red. Yet Chinaza stood firm. He did not beg, nor did he cry out. Hours passed. Zubairu watched from above, expecting him to falter. But still, Chinaza stood. Finally, the warlord called for him to be pulled out. You are either the bravest man I have met or the most foolish. Chinaza, covered in sweat but unbroken, replied, or perhaps I am simply the truest. Zubairu studied Chinaza for a long time. Then, at last, he gave a slow nod. You have shown strength, truth speaker. Perhaps your words are worth more than I thought. The next day, to the shock of his generals, Zubairu declared an end to the conquests. The war had ended, not with swords, but with truth. As Chinaza and Ekwueme departed, the freed people of the West bowed their heads in respect. Ekwueme smirked. So, do you ever get tired of proving people wrong? Chinaza chuckled. Only when they refuse to listen. As Chinaza left Zubairu's lands, he felt the weight of his journey upon his shoulders. Everywhere he went, kingdoms crumbled, rulers fell, and the world shifted. But was that truly what he wanted? Ekwueme, who had rejoined him on the road, watched him in silence before speaking. Truth is a powerful thing, Chinaza, but it is also a lonely path. Chinaza nodded. And yet, I cannot turn away from it. Ekwueme smiled sadly. Then let us walk together a little while longer. As they journeyed onward, the world spoke of Chinaza in different ways. Some called him a hero, others a curse. Some feared him, others sought him. But one thing was certain. Wherever Chinaza walked, truth followed. Weeks later, they found themselves back at the Whispering Desert. The land of shifting sands held secrets beneath its dunes, and one such secret awaited Chinaza. An old woman, cloaked in white, greeted them at the edge of an oasis. Truth speaker, your time in this world is not yet done. Chinaza frowned. Who are you? She simply smiled, a witness to what must come next. The woman led them to an ancient ruin where carvings foretold the arrival of a man who would change the world with his words alone. Ekwueme traced the etchings. This speaks of you, Chinaza. Chinaza remained silent. The woman placed a hand on the stone. There is one last kingdom that needs your truth. But be warned, this time, truth alone may not be enough. The kingdom of Ukuta was unlike any other Chinaza had encountered. Its people spoke in hushed whispers, and its ruler, King Ekwueme, never showed his face. At the city gates, a guard warned them, "Speak carefully here. In Ukuta, the truth is punishable by death." Chinaza exhaled. Then it seems I have found my greatest challenge yet. Chinaza was brought before King Ekwueme. The ruler sat behind a thick curtain, his voice echoing, but his form hidden. "You have walked far, truth speaker," the king said. "Tell me, do you fear what you cannot see?" Chinaza shook his head. "Truth is often unseen, but it is always felt." The king chuckled. "Then let us see if you can survive in a kingdom where truth is forbidden." Ukuta was a place where silence ruled. The streets were orderly, the people obedient, and the air heavy with unspoken fear. Chinaza noticed the absence of open marketplaces and the hushed voices of the people as they scurried past. A merchant whispered as he handed Chinaza some bread. "If you value your life, truth speaker, do not speak freely here." Chinaza turned to him. "Why?" The merchant's face paled. "Because in Ukuta, truth is punishable by death." The next morning, King Ekwueme summoned Chinaza to his court. The chamber was vast, adorned with statues of past rulers. but none bore the current king's likeness. "You stand before me, truth speaker." The king's voice echoed from behind the thick veil that concealed him. "Tell me, what do you see?" Chinaza studied the darkened throne. "I see a ruler who hides." A sharp murmur ran through the court. The king's voice remained calm. "And why do you think I hide?" "Because you fear truth." That night, a young woman named Ziora snuck into Chinaza's quarters. "You must leave before dawn," she whispered. "The king does not allow truth speakers to live." Chinaza studied her face. "Then why warn me?" Her eyes filled with sorrow. "Because once I spoke the truth too." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing deep scars on her wrists. "And this was my punishment." Chinaza knew then that he could not simply walk away. Over the next few days, Chinaza moved carefully through Ukuta, speaking in whispers to those who dared to listen. He learned of the king's paranoia, his belief that the truth would unravel his control. The people had suffered for too long, and in the darkness, a rebellion was forming. King Ekwueme summoned Chinaza once more. "I have allowed you to remain here, despite the danger you bring," he said. "But tell me, why do you seek to destroy my kingdom?" Chinaza met the invisible gaze behind the curtain. "I do not seek to destroy, only to reveal." The king sighed. "Then you leave me no choice." The guards stepped forward. Chinaza fought his way through the palace, dodging guards as the alarm bells rang. The people of Ukuta had been waiting for this moment, and as he ran through the streets, doors opened, hiding him from his pursuers. The rebellion had begun. As dawn broke, Chinaza climbed the highest tower in Ukuta and set fire to the beacon, a long-forgotten symbol of freedom. The flames roared, casting light across the city, and with it, the rebellion rose. The people, long silenced by fear, found their voices. The streets filled with whispers that grew into shouts, then into a deafening roar. The king's guards, overwhelmed, began to falter. Truth had awakened the city. King Ekwene's court was in chaos. His loyalists tried to suppress the uprising, but the truth had spread too far. The people demanded to see the face of the king who ruled them from behind a curtain. Chinaza stood before the veiled throne. "Your people no longer fear you. Come forward and face them." There was silence. Then, slowly, the veil was drawn back. A frail, trembling man sat upon the throne. His eyes, once filled with power, now held only fear. The people gasped. Truth had stripped him bare. With the king unmasked, his rule collapsed. His guards, seeing him for what he truly was, laid down their weapons. The people surged forward, but Chinaza raised a hand. "There is no need for violence," he said. "The truth is punishment enough." The people, now free, cast out their former ruler, but no blood was spilled. Ukuta had been saved, not by swords, but by the power of truth. Chinaza and Ekwueme left Ukuta behind, walking once more into the unknown. The world had changed again, and with it, their path had shifted. What now? Ekwueme asked. Chinaza smiled faintly. Truth is never finished. There are more shadows to lift. And so they walked on. As they traveled, whispers of an ancient prophecy reached Chinaza's ears, one that spoke of a truth speaker who would either unite the world or bring about its end. Ekwueme frowned. I don't like the sound of that. Chinaza exhaled. Neither do I. But the road ahead called, and the truth could not be ignored. Their journey led them to Erumu, a kingdom teetering on the edge of war. Two brothers fought for the throne, and the land was caught in their struggle. Another war, Ekwueme muttered. And I suppose we are walking right into it. Chinaza nodded. If truth can stop it, then we must try. As they reached the gates of Erumu, Chinaza knew this would be his greatest test yet. The battle for the kingdom was not one of swords, but of words. The fate of Erumu, and perhaps the world, rested on a single question. Could truth alone save a kingdom divided? Erumu was on the brink of war. The two rival brothers, Prince Jide and Prince Obafemi, had each declared themselves the rightful ruler, and their armies prepared for battle. Chinaza and Ekwueme arrived in the capital, where tension crackled in the air. The people spoke in hushed voices, afraid of choosing the wrong side. Ekwueme sighed. Truth alone will not stop this war, Chinaza. Chinaza nodded. But it may prevent a kingdom from destroying itself. Both princes agreed to meet Chinaza, but separately. First, he was taken to Prince Jide's camp. You are the truth speaker, Jide said. Tell me, am I not the rightful ruler? Chinaza answered carefully. You believe yourself to be, but truth is not what we believe, it is what is. Jide frowned, but did not press further. Later, Chinaza met with Obafemi, who asked the same question. Chinaza gave him the same answer. You say much, and yet say nothing, Obafemi grumbled. I say only what is true, Chinaza replied. Chinaza sensed something deeper at play. The brothers had been raised together, once inseparable. What had turned them into enemies? He spoke to the elders of Erumu and learned of a third party, whispering in the ears of both princes. Chief Adewale, a powerful noble who stood to gain from war. This war is not theirs, Chinaza murmured. It belongs to the man who feeds their hatred. Chinaza gathered both princes in the royal court. Before you fight, you must hear the truth, he said. He exposed Chief Adewale's schemes, how he had spread false rumors, pitted the brothers against one another, and positioned himself to claim power after the war. The hall erupted in shock. Adewale, realizing he had been unmasked, tried to flee, but was seized by the royal guard. The war had been halted, not by armies, but by truth. With Adewale's treachery exposed, the brothers were forced to confront their own anger. They saw the war for what it was, a deception. Prince Jide turned to his brother. I do not wish to rule a land of ashes. Obafemi nodded. Then let us rebuild what was almost lost. The kingdom of Erumu was restored, not through bloodshed, but through understanding. As Chinaza prepared to leave, the people of Erumu gathered to honor him. Stay, the princes urged. Help us rebuild. But Chinaza shook his head. Truth does not belong to one kingdom. It must travel. Nkem smiled. And so must we. As they left Erumu behind, Nkem turned to Chinaza. We stopped one war, but many remain. Chinaza exhaled. Truth alone cannot end all conflicts. But where there is deception, there must always be someone willing to reveal it. And so they walked on into the unknown, where more battles of words and wisdom awaited. As Chinaza and Nkem journeyed through the valleys of the east, they met a traveler who claimed to have seen the oracle of tree. She speaks of you, truth speaker, the traveler said. She says your greatest challenge still lies ahead. Chinaza frowned. Then we must find her. The oracle of Nri was an ancient seer, known for revealing fates that even kings feared. When Chinaza arrived, she studied him for a long moment before speaking. You have changed the world, but the world is not yet ready for the truth. Chinaza's eyes narrowed. Then what must be done? She smiled faintly. That, truth speaker, is the question you must answer. Chinaza stood at a crossroads. He had witnessed kingdoms fall, rulers change, and wars be prevented. But he had also seen the cost of truth.
Truth is powerful, he said to Enki.
Millie, but is it enough? Nkem looked at him thoughtfully. Only if people are willing to hear it. Chinaza nodded, understanding the weight of his journey. Chinaza did not stay in one place, nor did he seek power. He simply walked where truth was needed, leaving behind whispers of his name. Some say he became a spirit of wisdom, appearing only to those who truly sought the truth. Others say he still walks among us, hidden in the stories we tell. But one thing is certain. Wherever deception lives, the truth will always find a way to rise.
And so, the man who spoke only truth became more than a man. He became a legend.